Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. Good morning. Yes, I'm still waiting for some latecomers. As I said, welcome. This is the 5th International Conference on Audiovisual Translation. This time, for the first time, we have it here at the Institute of Applied Linguistics at the University of Warsaw. It is my pleasure to ask my boss, Deputy Director for Research and International Relations, Dr. Agnieszka Lenko-Szymańska, to open the conference. And then I'll ask Professor Łukasz Bogucki on behalf of the Intermedia group to continue opening, and then I'll say a few words regarding the housekeeping.
Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the University of Warsaw and the Institute of Applied Linguistics, I would like to welcome you to the 5th International Conference on Audiovisual Translation Intermedia. And I would like to thank the Intermedia Research Group for granting us the privilege of organizing this conference. My colleagues and I are thrilled to receive so many participants from Poland, from across Europe and even further afield, as also participants from our own university. We are proud to offer this platform for researchers and practitioners who share a common interest in audio-visual translation. I believe that the Institute of Applied Linguistics is the right venue for this event. I will say that very modestly. Our institute is the oldest and the most renowned institution of higher education training translators and interpreters in Poland. Over 300 students leave yearly our alma mater, completing our BA and MA programs, as well as our PhD program and 3 postgraduate programs. We train translators and interpreters in 5 official European languages, that is English, German, French, Spanish, and more recently also Swedish. But we also train in other languages, in Russian and in Japanese. Our member is the Institute of 2 European consortia, the European Masters in Translation and the European Masters in Conference Interpreting, as well as the more worldwide consortium SUTI. Our mission is to provide state-of-the-art professional training for translators and interpreters, and we recognize the need for our students not only to be well-versed in using new technologies for the professional activities, but also to gain expertise in more specialized aspects of translation, such as audiovisual translation. That is why a range of our classes also offers this subject. We are also proud to be home of several international and national grants related to audiovisual translation, focusing on such topics as interlingual live subtitling, empirical evaluation of audiovisual translation, re-speaking and audio description. All these projects were directed or are being directed by our colleague, Professor Agnieszka Szarkowska, who is the main organizer of this conference and to whom I would like to express special thanks for bringing us all together here. We hope that this conference will offer a unique opportunity to put our name even more prominently on the map of audiovisual translation research and training centers in our country. But first of all, will help us develop new contacts with other academic institutions in Poland, across Europe and in the world. Ladies and gentlemen, without any further ado, I would like to wish you a very successful conference filled with intellectually stimulating presentations, fruitful discussions. I hope that this conference will also be a great opportunity for everyone to form new links, start new projects, and last but not least, have a wonderful time in Warsaw. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome on behalf of the Intermedia Research Group. I'll be brief because you're here for the papers, not the speeches. I don't want to go into the past. I think we're all forward-looking here, and it's not my job here to talk about the history of the Intermedia Research Group. There's one thing I have to say, though. many of the papers you're going to hear today and tomorrow, and in particular, this amazing technology that you see in front of you that's happening over there in the booths, would have been pure science fiction when we started back in 2007. So the progress of audiovisual translation and audiovisual translation research is palpable. Thanks are due in particular to the Warsaw team, in particular Agnieszka Szakowska, for making it happen in such a wonderful way, and the entire Intermedia research group. Ania Jankowska, who is, yes, over there, oh well, in two persons, as if. Iwona Mazur, Mikołaj Deckert, Agnieszka Chmiel, who is not here with us. Thank you. I hope you all have a wonderful conference, and I am sure, and I hereby declare, that this is not the last Intermedia audiovisual translation research, wherever in Poland it may be, but definitely not the last. Thank you very much.
Thank you both, and to continue with thanking and some housekeeping, as I promised. I just want to say that this is the largest Intermedia conference so far. We have 134 participants from 29 countries from 5 different continents. Thank you for coming. And this would not be possible without our sponsors and partners. So let me just briefly go over them and thank them for supporting us. First of all, I'd like to extend my thank you to Nordisk Undertext, our platinum sponsor, for making it all possible. Thank you so much. I hear they are a great place to work. So, you know, apart from university, of course. Right, so thank you. We also have gold sponsors. That's Supti, Una, Subtitle Next, and Start International. Thank you for your generous support as well. We also have other partners. Fred, the Festival Insider, is promoting our event online. So you may see some people with the mic. If they ask you for an interview, please don't refuse. We also, I'd like to thank AI Media for their support in live subtitling English to English. As you can see, those of you who are in the room and those of you who are online as well. We have live intralingual English to English subtitles right there. Hopefully they will appear. That's bad luck. Once I mention them, they're gone. So they're there, and the reason we may not see them right now is that there's actually a re-speaker or a pair of re-speakers in London listening to us and doing everything live. So live subtitles English to English are done online from London, and the more challenging task of interlingual English to Polish live subtitles, the ones that you can see in the center of the room, are done by our great team just at the back of the room, based here at this institute. They're doing this without any interpreter. They're going directly from the English original to Polish subtitles. They're doing re-speaking. So well done. Thank you as well to Newton Technologies for providing us with speech recognition for Polish. We would also like to thank Fundacja Widzialni and the Embassy of the United States of America for bringing over experts from the United States who came particularly for this event. We'll be able to hear from them later on during the conference. And we also have a number of other partners: European Association for Studies in Screen Translation, SATL, the Polish Association of Audiovisual Translators. Thank you for spreading the news and for promoting the event. And finally, our academic and organizing partner, Jagiellonian University. I don't have a logo here, I wasn't allowed to use it. Thank you. So I have to say, this is a brilliant cooperation between, I can't say because there's two good universities that I'm talking about right now, and I'm not going to use the word the best or anything. So the oldest and the largest, let's say, two universities in Poland that are involved in organizing this conference. Okay, what else do we have here? Does everybody have a mobile phone with them? Yes, so take them out now, please. If you haven't downloaded the Slido app, please download Slido right now. It's a free app. If you don't want to download anything and you have your laptop or iPad, you can also go there. While downloading, I explain what you're going to do with it. Once you have it, you need to insert the code Intermedia 2019. This is the app that will allow us to organize the best presentation competition. We're doing it for the first time, so it may not work. We may get 20 winners or whatever. So the key thing is to vote, okay? In order for this to work, everybody please vote. Once you log in, you'll be able to see the rooms and the dates. We are now in a big room, which after the coffee break is going to be split into two. Okay, so there's going to be a wall in the middle of this room. Where I'm standing is a room number 7 at the end, and number 8 is on my right-hand side. Okay, there's a door to the room number 7 right here. Okay, so while voting on Slido, make sure you know which room you're in. Okay, so there's just two choices, and there's nothing there yet because the voting will begin after the coffee break once the papers will start. There's no voting on the plenary session, right? We know it's going to be great anyway. So please vote during the panels, okay? It's only possible for us, technically possible, to have one poll open in the room, okay? So once you're in the panel, after the presentation, take your phone or your laptop and vote. How do you vote? You have from 1 to 7 stars. 1 is the, not particularly interesting and boring, and number 7, excellent, okay? So give the presentations as many stars as you want. Make sure you assess all of them, the ones that you have seen, actually, right? Yes, and during the coffee break after the panel, we'll close the voting. So it won't be possible to vote on a presentation tomorrow that you saw today, okay? You just need to vote after the presentations. Hope that's clear, okay? Right, if you're on Twitter, that's the hashtag for the conference, Intermedia 2019 Warsaw. I had to add Warsaw because there was another event, Intermedia 2019, and they took my hashtag. So it's Intermedia 2019 Warsaw. And as I said, this event is being streamed online. If you go to our website, and also to Twitter and the Facebook page, you'll find the links there. There's live streaming available with English live subtitles as well as with Polish live subtitles, the ones that we can see here. So if you know of someone who can't be with us today but would like to participate, please share the link with them so they can also take part in the panels. The online streaming we'll have for the plenary sessions today and tomorrow, and for the panel discussion for the round table later today. Other sessions will not be streamed. So those people during the streaming sessions, please speak to the mic because, as I said, the re-speakers at the back of the room are listening to you, the guys in London are listening, and people online. So we need to make sure they can hear us. Yes, let me just say a few more words. The internet code, if you haven't got it, you can get it at the reception downstairs. There's going to be a coffee break at 11, right? Coffee breaks will take place on this floor, so just leave the room and coffee will be waiting. We'll have lunch from 1 to 2, both today and tomorrow, and it will be on floor number 3. And weather permitting, the rooftop terrace will be open, so you can go and have a look there. Certificate of attendance will be sent to you in PDF files. We're trying to go eco and trying to reduce plastic and trying to reduce waste. So let's see how it goes. If you have any questions, please address them to Jagiellonian University. You've got their email. If not, we'll give it to you. And conference dinner, to those of you who have signed up, 7:30 tonight in Arkady Kubickiego. If you don't know where that is, ask at the reception. And finally, you can, if you have any questions or issues, you can see there we have two colors of lanyards. The yellow ones show you the people that you can ask questions. Okay, so these are the organizers, right? The green ones are just for regular participants. All right then, that's all for me, and let's make this conference incredible, and let's make it remember for good reasons, hopefully. Thank you for coming, and let me invite our plenary speaker, Carol O'Sullivan from the University of Bristol, with her talk on the history of audiovisual translation. We're starting with history today, and we'll continue with more advanced, technologically advanced experimental research tomorrow during the plenary. Carol, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much indeed, Agnieszka, and to the University of Warsaw and to the Intermedia conference for this invitation to present here. Let me just find myself, which is, I'm going to presume that I can, let me just, okay. So, research in audiovisual translation is one of the most lively areas of translation studies today, and with good reason. In a fast-changing digital environment, and with the rapid development of media accessibility policies in many countries, it is essential to understand how audiovisual translation is carried out, how it is received, and what it can become in the future. In this plenary talk, I'm going to argue that it's also essential to understand the past, or rather the multiple pasts, of audiovisual translation. But I sort of feel that I have to justify that in this area because what's happening now is so exciting. Why am I going to now spend 35 minutes or so telling you why the past is exciting? So I have 10 reasons, which I'm going to talk fairly briefly about. I had more, I promise I had more, and I cut them out. And there will be reasons that I don't have here that you will also maybe, I don't know if we have time for questions, but perhaps that's something that can come up in the questions. So I'm going to start with what was my original reason for doing research in audiovisual translation, which is because it's there. So we climb mountains because they're there. We do research in the things that make us passionate with interest because they're there. And my because it's there moment was the moment when I asked myself, who did the first subtitles in English? What was the first film that was subtitled in the English-speaking world? When was it? Who was it? Why was it? And it was fascinating as a researcher for a couple of reasons. One, that was because it was already answered. There's an article from 1936 that says this was the first film subtitled in English, in the UK at least. So then I was like, well, yeah, but you know, the English-speaking world is much bigger than the UK. And also, can I believe this article from 1936? And the answer was, yes, the world is much bigger than the English-speaking world, and that I couldn't believe the article from 1936. So the article from 1936 said that about February 1932, we get the first subtitles in English, and in fact, it was already happening in 1931 and even 1930. So that was one thing that became very, very quickly fascinating and turned very quickly into a book project, which has been ongoing for a long time. But there was another reason why it was fascinating, which is that I was used, like many of us, I started out in literary translation, like many translation scholars, I should say. And I was used to having a pile of books and the urge to compare how different translators, say, had worked on a particular passage. And it was very disconcerting to be asking research questions like these, and not to know whether the materials that I needed for my research actually survived. So one of the interesting things about writing the history of audiovisual translation is that audiovisual translation studies itself is very sharply marked by its own historical moment. So the beginnings of audiovisual translation studies in the era, in the UK, say, of people like Peter Fawcett, are when VHS cassettes became available and people could actually watch a film over and over on their own timetable. But the real surge in audiovisual translation studies happened with DVD in the late 1990s. And suddenly you could not only watch a film over and over with at your own pace, but you could watch multiple subtitle tracks, you could compare subtitling and dubbing. And I think sometimes that audiovisual translation studies has forgotten or has not sufficiently taken into account that the historical contingency of its own being. So film studies in the 1950s was a lot about going to see films whenever they were showing and taking notes very fast and hoping that your memory held out. So that's been transformative and enormously interesting, but it has also made me want to look at, well, yes, but what was happening before that? So another reason my second reason to write the history of audiovisual translation is to historicize audiovisual translation practices. So again, perhaps because of the moment in which audiovisual translation studies got up and running, there was this sense of what's happening now. And we were using DVD subtitles as the reference point for our analysis. But we also need to think about what was happening before these DVD subtitles. So DVD itself changed, we know that it changed the norms of subtitling. People who were working in the industry remember this. But the subtitles of, say, 1935, the subtitles of 1955, the subtitles of 1985, and the subtitles now, these are quite different things. So one really, we could pick a lot of different illustrations, but the one I'm going to pick is a film called À nous la liberté by René Clair, which is a fairly early sound film, and one in which there's still a sense of experimentation as to how to make films which don't need an enormous amount of translation. And as it happens, the US release for that survives, 1933, and it's got 77 titles. When the BBC broadcast it in 1981, it had 230 titles. When Criterion DVD commissioned Lenny Borger, the great translator of French films, to do new subtitles, it was Rialto, it will have been Rialto Pictures, and it was released by Criterion. It had 433 titles. And I have an unknown sort of identification pending copy with 500 titles, but that is also a recent copy. So we need to ask ourselves, what are the implications of this for what we understand audiovisual translation to be? Why? Why so few subtitles in the beginning? Was it because people were used to silent titles, which were very selective about what they presented verbally to the audience? Are there so many subtitles now because songs are lovingly subtitled line by line as opposed to simply left as untranslated sound? And so on. Another area of AVT practice that we can usefully historicize is the treatment of the positioning of the text in the image. So we've seen increasingly in accessibility, but also in mainstream filmmaking, experiments. I'm thinking of something like this, experiments with what subtitles should look like, where they should be positioned in the image, what's the most immersive position for the subtitles. We've seen very attractive and engaging innovations in television, also very much with shows like Sherlock, with the positioning of text in the image. And they were already doing that in 1931. So in fact, in the very beginning of subtitling, they were saying, where can we find a dark spot on the screen where we can put our subtitles so that people will be able to read it? Because, right, they didn't have a drop shadow at the time. So you've got optical subtitling. But we've also got more aesthetic considerations. So for instance, here we've got a scene from Victor Trivas's Niemandsland, where we've got things happening in 3 quadrants of the image, but not in the 4th. So the upper two quadrants of the image and the left-hand quadrant of the lower side of the image all have characters who are interacting, talking and doing things. And so we have this nice 4-line subtitle which looks a bit like an intertitle sitting there in the corner. Similarly, we have a character who is moving objects around the screen, and the subtitle is going to move around the screen depending on where he is. And this, I'm just going to draw your attention to the watermark on the image, is a Dutch print of Niemandsland from the Eye in Amsterdam, and it just happens to be out there on Europeana. And it's one of the very few artifacts of really early subtitling which is out there for everybody to enjoy, and I'm going to come back to that point later. So our third reason for writing the history of audiovisual translation is to interrogate the well-worn narrative, and that's, of course, a basic function of history. So what are the well-worn narratives that the historian of audiovisual translation would like to interrogate? And the first, and perhaps, well, one of my favorite narratives to interrogate is that everything was easy in audiovisual translation until the coming of sound, that silent film was easy to translate. All you did was you snipped out the intertitles, you reshot them in the target language, you spliced that footage back into the print, and then you shipped your print to your market, or then you distributed it if it was done already in the territory. And of course the answer is, well, yes, this could be done, but in practice it often wasn't done. So silent film has over sound film the benefit of having no synchronized soundtrack. So you can do almost anything with that material. And again, I think this is something that's it's easy to forget in this day and age of mashups and GIFs and all kinds of manipulation of the audiovisual image, that was happening again in the silent period. So films were routinely, for instance, being radically shortened for the English-speaking market because of English speakers having such short attention spans. The extra scenes could be added or taken out depending on, how they played in the market. Endings could be changed. So the so-called Russian ending, the idea that sad endings were necessary for certain markets and happy endings were necessary for other markets. And in the sort of vertically integrated industry, exhibitors had a lot of that agency, right? So sometimes you might get a film print shipped with multiple endings, and the exhibitor could even choose. This apparently happened with the test of the D'Urbervilles. Exhibitors were allowed to choose whether they wanted to play the ending where it all ends badly or the ending where it all ends well. This is something which film historians have called extensive attention to, that silent film was considered this universal language, but in fact there was this enormous labor of translation happening to make that fiction of the universal language actually work, in terms not only of reshooting intertitles, but of reshooting all sorts of paratexts and reframing films for new markets. Okay, so another well-worn narrative that I and a number of other scholars, including Jean-François Cornu here present, have been thinking about in recent years is, how fast was this transition from silent films being translated to, oh, whoops, do we choose dubbing or subtitling? And it can seem sometimes in the histories as if that was very fast. And in fact, it took place over a very long period of time with hybrid practices. So you had the famous multilingual versions where they shot several versions of the same film on the same set. But that was often combined with dubbing. So a film could be partially reshot and partially dubbed, like Fritz Lang's M in a number of markets. You also had practices which straddled the silent and sound period, like the reshooting of insert shots. So it was that transition from silent to sound, took a long time, and as long as or longer than it took to actually set up the infrastructure and the equipment in cinemas to show sound films. But it also reflected practices that continued into the sound period, and that many of them are continuing now. So the last thing that I want to talk about, which is again a narrative, the debunking of which is dear to my heart, which is the idea that the subtitled film offers us privileged access to an authentic and accessible original. So a lot of the early debate in AVT itself, in AVTS, was about is dubbing or subtitling better, and this is not a debate that is appropriate or needs to happen here, or indeed anymore. But there is a lingering sense, particularly among audiences, that subtitles are unproblematic in their giving us access. And again, I think looking at audiovisual translation history allows us to look at multiple versions of the same film with different readings over time, reflecting different norms and different translators' interpretations. And that also allows us to think about the powerful rhetorical effect that subtitles have as part of our viewing experience, and the powerful reframing effect. So I'm just going to show you two frames here. So this is from Le Jour se lève, and it's a subtitle from a pretty early subtitle version of Le Jour se lève, and a subtitle from a very recent version. And what we can see is simple things like one is more condensed, one is thinking more perhaps about where you break the line, one is breaking the line perhaps in somewhere we wouldn't break a line now. But that leaving a small bit of the sentence on the last line of the subtitle is very common in that period. And it creates, I would argue, a rhetorical effect that with time and exposure, it gives a very different film viewing experience. So even very, very subtle things like that, I think, are worth bringing back to our research attention, but also to audience attention. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit more presently. Okay, so another reason to, whoops, I'm going to see if I can actually make this happen. Another reason to study audiovisual translation is to bring insights of the past to bear on current challenges. And I've had conversations with a number of people in this room about this topic. I wanted to be able to show us something that demonstrated really the continuity of the past with the present. So I'm not... Is there an interpreter in the house? Am I able to... I need just to see if I can open that
you just
in.
don't understand Polish, right?
Yes, sorry.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so what we're watching here is a very tiny snippet of a film. Oh, we're not.
Is this what we wanted to do?
This one.
Is it extended screen? I can't remember.
If it's a problem, then we don't have to.
Can't remember if this was the issue of extended screen.
I might need your help to get back to where I was.
Okay. Let's see now. I need to just look here. So just press.
Yeah. Okay. Sound. Do we have?
Yeah, just need to.
Okay. So what you're going to watch, it's silent. So the sound is the sound is nice to have anyway, but the sound is in a sense not the point of it. What we're watching here is a very short snippet of a film called Ben-Hur, which some of you may have heard of. It's not the Charlton Heston Ben-Hur, it's the Fred Niblo Ben-Hur from the 1920s, in which, however, the chariot race is also a climactic point in the film. And so another of the things, perhaps the narratives that we could consider debunking, is the idea that superimposed text on the image only happened with the sound era. So obviously the shift from intertitles to superimposed text on the image was very important, but it was already present very much in the silent era as a special effect. So in moments that were particularly immersive or for particular rhetorical purposes, you had text superimposed on the image. And this is one of those moments. So we've got this climactic chariot race, we've got charioteers doing all kinds of cheaty things to beat each other. And in this moment we have, oh yes, I have to. So let me just go back. Okay. Okay, so we're going to stop there for a second. So that's the film as it was released. And of course, this poses a huge problem for distribution, because instead of snipping those intertitles out of between the moving footage and then snipping them back in, you have your intertitles are suddenly on the image. So what do you do? And this is something which is still a problem today. Anybody who's tried to watch Sherlock in a number of different language markets will have noticed how cack-handedly the localization was done. Not all markets, but some. And indeed, when this film was restored, with, I think, international distribution in mind, the question was, well, what do we do with this? Do we reshoot footage? It was restored in the 80s by Thames, and what they chose to do was this. And again. I'm going to now ask Agnieszka's help to get rid of that before it starts playing us an ad for Grammarly, which
But you need to...
I just need to get back to my PowerPoint. Thank you so much. So what you will see there is a number of things happening, and one of them is turning a silent film back into modern-day ideas of what a silent film should be, i.e. having intertitles. But another is saying, well, this is now something that we can export. This is now something that we can easily localize in different languages. So this is, again, as I said, to give us an idea of continuity in the study of audiovisual translation of now and in the past. Reason number 5, and the reasons are going to get quicker from now on. To look at agents and the tools of translation, and this is following work by people like Chesterman and Pym. Chesterman, who proposes a translator studies, which focuses primarily and explicitly on the agents involved in translation, on their activities and their attitudes, their interaction with their social and technical environment, or their history and influence. And Pym, who argues in an essay on humanizing translation history that we should study translators before we study texts, and secondly, that this will involve us in a multidiscursive discussion. In other words, translators can't be isolated from other cultural activities that are happening. And this is something we see very much when we look at some of the agents of audiovisual translation history. So I'm going to show you two great women, Julia Woolf and May Harris. And Julia Woolf was the in-house subtitler at the Curzon in the 1930s, went on to work in wartime on propaganda films, and was an editor then after the war. And May Harris was also a subtitler in the 1930s, but at the Academy, and she became the first professional subtitler in the UK. She ran the first subtitling company in the UK, and she was at one point, she and her company were subtitling 80% of what came into the UK. And as you know, that's not a huge amount of films, but nevertheless, 80% of foreign films that came through the UK came through May Harris. And one of the interesting things when researching these figures as translators is we can only do it because at the time their authorship was recognized through attribution of their names in the credits of the films, which means that they're there on the prints and they're also there in reviews. So searching the press databases, which are the linchpin of this kind of research, we can begin to link people with the films that they worked on. But also that their work extended in ways much beyond, say, what an audiovisual translator might be doing today. So they didn't consider themselves members of the language industry. They considered themselves members of the film industry, and they were part of film distribution rather than translation per se. Translation, of course, at the time was also not professionalized in the way it is now, but they were also heavily involved as editors. So Julia Woolf was written up in magazines as somebody who could read the soundtrack of a film just off the optical track, and she could edit just off the optical track. Her most famous accomplishment, well, famous is relative, but her most famous accomplishment was removing the lisp of a well-known actress from the soundtrack of a film. So we're told, by identifying the lisp in the visually. But May Harris turns up as somebody who turns up very frequently in the British Board of Film Classification censorship files as somebody who was not only subtitling the films but also editing them and fighting the corner for specific shots which she felt should be kept in the film and conceding other shots. So she was, that subtitler editor boundary was non-existent in the case of these translators. So here's one of this is Visconti's Censo. This is Mai Harris had her own credit in the films that she titled. This happened with a few other subtitlers, and alas, I think we would all agree that it's something we don't see very often today. And this, of course, is in the opening credits, not in the closing credits. So a related aim of writing audiovisual translation is to write the international history of the AVT profession. And this is not, I should say, I'm cheating slightly here. I'm showing you not an audiovisual translator, but Miriam Borsutsky, who was editing in the live action opening credits of Roman d'un Tricheur by Guitry, who was the film's editor. But something that, as far as I know, hasn't been worked on very much is the material which survives in individual countries of the development of the audiovisual translation industry in those countries. So, of course, what I'm talking here slightly about almost an author-led approach, where we're looking at the subtitlers themselves, but this has to happen in the context of a wider industrial history, which I hope very much is something that is beginning to be written in a number of countries. We write audiovisual translation history to bring to bear insights from film history and film scholarship. Of course, it's a two-way street. But some of the insights that film history and film scholarship can offer us include the fact that, given that film is an editing-based medium, we need, when looking at audiovisual translation, and here I'm quoting Lieven Dulst in 2015, to reconstitute the modalities of cultural transfer within which translations proper take place and acquire meaning. That language transfer is one of a number of very integrated activities which is taking place, and that this has to be recognized. So that context, the importance of context and of a sort of also of a cultural studies approach. We can also think about this, the idea of the multiplicity of the film text, and this is something which has come up several times. It's something I think is enormously important for reasons which I will come back to very briefly shortly at the end of my paper. But two scholars whose work on this I wanted to just mention include François Thomas, whose work with Marie Frappat, three scholars, François Thomas, Marie Frappat, and whose work on le film pluriel, or the plural film, has acted as a bridge between translation studies and film studies. And Pablo Romero Fresco, whose work on the global film is something which we've also talked about in the past. And the other thing, of course, again, to just underline, that the roots of digital practices can and should be traced back to the analog era, and that continuum should be identified and valorized. But likewise, what can we give to film history? And I would argue that translation studies and audiovisual translation studies has a huge amount to give to media history and media scholarship, including new readings of canonical films revealed by their translation history and forgotten episodes in media history. And I'm just keeping a little bit of an eye on the time, but let's just talk very briefly about a film called Rome Open City by Roberto Rossellini. And there are several aspects of this film's history and this film's status that can be very successfully and interestingly interrogated by looking at it through the lens of audiovisual translation. First of all, something as bold as an opening credit for the distributors becomes a fascinating story when we think that the Rodney Geiger who appears in these opening credits from 1946 is the GI who is supposed to have stumbled out of a brothel home, bumped into Rossellini filming the movie, got interested and taken a copy back in his bag after the war to America, which was then released with subtitles by Pietro Di Donato and Herman Weinberg, and released by Arthur Meyer and Joseph Burston, who sold the film as Open City, a deliberately provocative title which would allow this kind of marketing. So lots of legs, women in their underwear, and so on, and an infamous quote from Life magazine, which was the best thing that ever happened to those distributors, which said, "Violence and plain sexiness project a feeling of dangerous struggle Hollywood seldom approaches." So the film was censored in the UK for mostly for torture. But so there are a number of things we can say about it. 3 things. One of them is, let's compare briefly with the release of this film in St Brigid's Cinema in Tubbercurry in County Sligo in 1948, which you can't really read it there, but at the bottom it says, Open City, the story of a priest hunted by the Nazis, the year's finest religious film. So this film allowed these 2 diametrically opposed readings. And this is in itself fascinating for thinking about the context in which translation is happening. What were the translation decisions which supported those 2 readings? Another aspect of this film's distribution which is fascinating is, and which has been completely erased from history, is that that version seen in Tubbercurry had subtitles in 2 languages, in Irish and in English. Released by the British distributor London Films, it was an experiment brazenly appealing to Damon De Valera and the Irish language agenda in Ireland at the time to say, well, we of course always release films in the language of the country. You know, well, it's a no-brainer. Of course we're going to release this film with Irish subtitles. Funnily enough, that wasn't what the Irish people thought of it. If we look briefly at a letter from somebody signing themselves Saxon, it was with amazement that I saw in your widely read paper the news item that the film Open City is to be presented in Dublin with both Irish and English subtitles, as many people will understand the Irish as will understand the Italian dialogue. It is a peculiarly inappropriate time to make this futile gesture of respect to the language. We could go on. There's a lot more to say about that case, but I'll stop there. The third thing to say about this film is this line of dialogue here, which describes a character played by Marcello Pagliero, who is a resistance fighter, who is identified in the 1946 release version towards the beginning of the film as a communist. In other versions of the film, it's not until the end of the film, at the climactic point where he's being interrogated, sorry for spoilers, that we discover he's a communist, and that is used as a point of tension in the film. And the restored version of this film from Bologna doesn't have this line in it. The only place I've found this line is this 1946 release version, which is the version which circulated for many decades. It's an interesting history. So looking through this lens at film, I think, has the potential in some cases to revolutionize both national and textual histories of film. Okay. So to identify what survives is the second last of the reasons to do this research. And it's related, I'm giving there a still from Colette's subtitles for Made in Uniform for the French release, an enormously important early film translation, but also something which is very linked to an important French cultural figure. But it is we want to find that out because we want to find out what might still be out there. You will all know, any of you who have, I don't know, ever tried to find an old TV show for, or to trace an audiovisual product from some time ago, how difficult it is. We know, any of you who are Doctor Who fans will know how much television has been thrown out in the course of the decades. We know most silent film, for instance, is already gone. I would argue that most audiovisual translations are probably also already gone. But it is a good time now to be looking at what might still be out there. The lost bilingual English-Irish subtitled version of Open City, a possible English intertitled version of Fritz Lang's M, the extra sequences that were edited into Claire's Le Million for distribution in a number of markets, the 14 titles which were added to the feature film Le Chemin du Paradis in summer 1931 in London to make one of the first subtitling experiments in English. So that brings us to a question, one of two last questions. Who are we writing this history for? I would say we're writing it for ourselves as researchers, for our fellow researchers in other disciplines, for practitioners in the industry internationally, but also crucially for audiences. We're in a situation where audiences have sometimes a relatively limited understanding of the factors which influence the audiovisual translation choices they're being faced with, and also in a situation where companies are eager to explore non-human approaches to audiovisual translation. None of that is anything that we can change, but we can look at the human history of audiovisual translation to ask ourselves what that can tell us about audience taste, about what a film can be in translation. I would also like to say something very briefly about the inherent injustices of this as a field of research, which is going to feel a little bit perhaps like a slight change of tone, possibly a difficult change of tone. But I recently read a piece by Catherine Rudy in the Times Higher Education Supplement, where she said historians are faced with an enormous challenge, which is the normalization of the idea that researchers should put their own funds into their research, in the arts and humanities in particular. We know that, and those of us working across disciplines know that there are very different views of how funding works and what funding mechanisms are in the sciences versus the arts and humanities, even in the social sciences versus the arts and humanities. And this results in a situation where, I think she's probably an extreme case, but she doesn't have a mortgage or a house because she studies medieval manuscripts. She spends an enormous amount of her money on copyright, on travel to archives, and on clearing images, high-quality images, for disseminating her research, which is something which is extremely important to all of us. So one of the things that I would call for is that this is an area where we see the challenge to the arts and humanities funding model that I hope people will address further in the future. And the second thing I just wanted to raise, and this is in the awareness that tomorrow is an international climate strike, is that the archival research as a form of research is one which is extremely heavy on individual researchers traveling to individual archives to find, to analyze material which often has never been taken out of its box. So it's an enormously important aspect of historical research, but it's also something which is, I think, increasingly unsustainable in an era when, as researchers, we're all going to be having to think very carefully about how and where we travel and where we put our priorities. And again, I would put out a call for, and it's already out there, but I would underline the call for international collaboration and a renewal of thinking about archival method and collaborative archival methods in order to think about how we make audiovisual translation research sustainable into the next century. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Carol, for this fascinating talk. Lots of different topics there to discuss. We have time for a few questions. Is there anyone who would like to ask a question or make a comment? I think I read this paper that you mentioned, this research, and she was traveling back and forth on the Eurostar to some archives. So research costs money. You have a question? Yes, Sarah. Is the mic on? We have another mic here.
I think, okay. It was green, said hello, but wasn't working. So you mentioned something quite interesting. That
Could you hold the mic really close?
I don't remember, you said something really interesting when you were talking about that first subtitlers in England. I don't remember her name, May something?
Harris, yes.
May Harris. And you mentioned that she saw herself as part of the film industry and not as part of the language industry. Have you spotted when that change happened? When Pablo Romero Fresco, in his book, talks about this divorce between the film industry and the subtitling and audiovisual translation industry. But it would be really interesting to see when and why and what were the agents behind this change and this divorce. Do you have any data on that?
Not only anecdotal, but Harris is an anomaly in being somebody who makes a career out of what she's doing. People who go through her studio, so there are records of people who were employed by her, or not her studio, but her lab, if you like, were tended to go on and do other things in the industry. So it was like an internship. They worked for her, and then they went on, like Di Vaughan and people like that, to be editors or whatever. If we look at who was subtitling in the UK after the Second World War, then it tends to be very ad hoc. So Rialto commissioned 6 films from a guy who wrote musical reviews for the stage, and who happened to speak French, who'd fought in the war. George Slocum, the journalist, he worked as a Paris correspondent. He subtitled some films. So a number of people who worked for the stage. It was sort of a part of a portfolio. It was really a portfolio career thing for a lot of people. And the only people I can think of who made careers out of it in the UK were probably Harris and John Minchinton, who then did a huge amount of work for the BBC. So I can't put a date on it, but it's a really good question, and it's something I'll bear in mind. Thank you.
I have 2 questions relating to the St. Bridget's Cinema in Tubbercurry. One is that would they have been Italian to Irish translators? And if not, was it the first time pivot language was used? And the other thing, if they were Italian to Irish translators, most of those people at the time would have been priests probably serving in Italy. So was there an issue with that, if they were Italian to Irish translators?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. So the answer to everything is yes, I think. So there are 2 attributions of the subtitles. Before the film was released, we were told that the subtitles were being done by a Spiritan father called Andreas McEgoin, or Andy Egan. And yes, it would seem that likely that he would have Italian, and he also had Irish. He was somebody who was active in the Irish language movement. But at the time the film was seen, the credit was for Tom Dunn, a journalist called Tom Dunn, who was a linguist who had Italian, I think, at least at some point in his career. I'm not sure whether he had Irish. So whether they collaborated on the subtitles, I'm not sure. But at the time, you read a lot about the fact that people are frustrated that the Irish language policy means that things are being translated back out of English into Irish. So there's already a sort of pivot translation, an anti-directional translation thing happening. And somebody does comment on the fact that they think it's likely that the subtitles are a pivot translation through English. If so, oh no, I tell you what, there's a second experiment in Irish language subtitling in 1966, which gets a much stronger audience reaction, and that's Irish-only subtitles for Bicycle Thieves, shown on RTE. And there's a storm of protest because there's no English subtitle, so people have to rely on the Irish subtitles. And in some rural areas, people have been waiting 15 years since the film came out to see the film. And in that case, they said that the irony is that the chances are there was an intermediate English translation between the Italian and the Irish, and yet they only put the Irish up on screen. So yeah, these are really good questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Carol. This is also interesting, and I've realized how little we know about the beginnings of what we do, actually. So apply for grants to do research, people, on this.
But also I see that this is also on the conference program, that there are people working,
which is
wonderful to see. So I'm really looking forward to hearing
research on Polish subtitling from the 1930s to be presented soon. Thank you so much. Let's give a round of applause to Carol. And let me now invite our panelists here. We're going to have roundtable discussion with professional audiovisual translators. I'm going to move over there, and could we have, yes, you know who you are, right?
You're in the middle.
Yeah, you should in the middle.
Yes.
In one row.
So we're both.
Yeah, let's try to. Move over and make room for the others. Don't they? Thank you. Now, get everyone a glass of water. I'm so thirsty. Oh, sorry. Should I go?
Krzysiek and Kristen, can you share the mic right there, and we can take the other mic.
All right.
No, this one. We have a mic right there. This one. Yeah. Okay. And then to give Amelie, Agnieszka, and yeah, sure. We have one there. Okay. Let us start. As you can see, we're giving prominence. We're not living in the ivory tower, hopefully. We're giving prominence to professional translators. We really care about them, and I'm really happy to have both professional translators and academics in the same room. It's a great chance, I think, for us to talk and exchange ideas and to make sense or to give sense to what we do, talking from my own perspective. So let me welcome everyone. I perhaps just go from people here on my right-hand side. That's Magda Adamus, no affiliation, a freelancer, now happy freelancer. Agnieszka Walczak, happy freelancer and an in-house something I'm not supposed to mention. And research, of course, yes, a PhD. Amalie Voss, Christine Gerdes, and Krzysztof Kowalczyk. Right, I think we should start with introductions. Perhaps could I ask you to briefly introduce yourselves and tell us what kind of AVT you do? Do you do subtitling, dubbing, voiceover, audio description? Do you work for local international companies? What kind of language combinations? Do you represent any organizations, etc.? Yeah, you just need to wait a bit until it's on. If not, we have some more mics.
Hello?
Yes. Okay.
Okay, I'll go first then. I'm Amelia Voss. I head the Danish group of subtitlers in the Danish Union of Journalists, a real union to which we're allowed to be members there. It's fine. It's not a problem. So it just shows that you can unionize as a translator. It's not unheard of. But more importantly, in this context, I head up the Audiovisual Translators Europe, which is an umbrella organization, like a federation of all the national associations and organizations, so that we can talk and move together. Very important. Where do you want to go? This way?
My name is Christine Gerdes. I'm a German translator and subtitler. My main focus is on subtitling. I work from English and French into German. And I'm also a committee member of SATO, the British Subtitlers Association, who's a proud member association of AVT that Amalie just mentioned.
My name is Krzysztof Kowalczyk. I'm Vice President of Staff Polish AV Translators Association. I've been translating for like 20 years, mainly subtitles and voiceover.
And you specialize in strong language, right? You have more mics.
I forgot to say what I mostly do, what the translations I mostly do, which is subtitling. Nearly all of my work is subtitling, some film scripts and so on, but it's nearly all subtitling. Do you want to say it also? I mentioned that. You mentioned that. Oh, I'm so sorry.
Okay, hello, I'm Agnieszka Walczak, and I'm sort of a mix of all the people who are sitting here, meaning I'm a researcher on the one hand. I did my PhD on media accessibility. I'm specializing in audio description. Apart from that, I'm also a practitioner, a freelance translator, and my specialties are audio description, as you may assume, subtitling for the deaf and hard of hearing, regular subtitles, and voiceover. And my working languages are English and Russian.
Hello, my name is Magdalena Adamus, and among people gathered here on this panel, I'm probably the only one that 100% only practitioner, not associated with any subtitling association, and I focus on subtitling mostly. Not yet. Yeah, Krzysztof, this is pending, right? So,
Yeah, you are.
thank you. So I just became a member of our association.
Well done.
Some of you might recognize my pink hat from various groups on subtitling on Facebook. I'm a moderator of subtitling all around the world. So this is why probably why I am here on this panel.
I have a mic here, thanks. Okay, let's start. I'll start with a few questions that I've prepared myself, and we'll open the floor to questions from the audience, so think about anything you would like to ask them. I wanted to start with a general question. In your view, what are the most important issues that audiovisual translators are facing today? And I suppose you are going to say one of them are low rates. And I don't know if everybody here in the room has heard that television subtitlers in Norway, was it right? And they went on strike against one of the companies, against BTI. And there was a dispute, right? How much can be done? How much subtitling can be done in a day? Can you make a living out of it? And how much should subtitlers be paid? So I suppose that might be one of the issues you want to talk about, but any other issues that you are facing today?
You start.
Is it on? Yes. Well, low rates obviously is very important. You're exactly right. And it's a race to the bottom for a lot of companies that we are trying to stop, obviously, because it's not, the companies are not getting what they want, or the companies may not care much, but the audiences care, and the audiences are not getting what they want, which is good or just, acceptable translations. You cannot do it. It isn't possible to do it. Using machine translation, artificially intelligencing the whole thing, it hasn't worked yet, and it's not working, and it's not producing the quality. So, so that is a really big thing. But it's not isolated, for our group. This is happening in a lot of professions. That ideally, various forces would like to do without human intervention. So it's not us alone, but it is a very important aspect.
Yes, I would like just to add to that today, of course, we are living in a fast-paced environment. Everything is fast. Everything has to be on the run. We want everything right here, right now. And when it comes to entertainment, it sort of has a similar and different role, I would say both. Why? One, we want it fast, meaning when their new series comes up, we want to have it translated as fast as possible. But on the other hand, after a hard day of work, we are coming back home and we want to relax in front of TV, computer, whatever you have there. And in order to do that, you need good quality localization service, simply, because everything that is delivered in a very rapid way may not carry this quality as we expected. So I think a very big question to all of us here today is whether our profession is still perceived as an art, I would say, right? Because I think we are, or most of us, or some of us at least, I can say for myself, are coming from the old school, so to say, meaning my work is an art. This is a very creative task. So yes, I know technology is here, and yes, I'm for it, and I'm not against using it at all. But we should think how it can help us not obstruct our daily work, simply because the standards are lowering because mainly of that, because people think it's not a creative task. We can have it as soon as possible. There is not a problem, just one click. It's not like that.
No, that's true.
As for me, the main problem now is that the quality is no longer an important factor for the companies and also for many viewers. That's the problem.
Yes, it's very true. I think in certain quarters there is this hope that viewers will eventually get used to poor quality and it will be okay. But fortunately it isn't. Many people are interested in good quality. And I think if the people who produced the content, as it's called, could see what poor translations do to their content, they would be shocked. And indeed, when they do see it, they are always, it really has an impact on them. So, and I agree that we are forgetting to talk about the creative aspects of our work. I think of it as a craft, but then, you know, I'm a Scandinavian, and to me, craftsmanship is just as good as art. So, but we won't argue on that. It is creative work, and it does. Even though most of us are used to working at quite a pace, it does need a little time.
Yeah, just adding on that, of course, it is an art, yes, in one way. On the other, of course, technology is there. Machine translation is coming, whether we like it or not. The question is how we are going to use it. So I think the role for us to face, maybe someday in the future, is those of editors. But editors, creative editors, right? So a lot of attention should be paid to the second step, editors, which is becoming like a combination of translator, and QSer or proofreader, whatever you want to call it. But this creative editor should always, for the moment, should be there, right? Because the technology is changing rapidly. So maybe in some years it will be better for every language, and it won't be required that much from us, right? But for the moment, this creative editor should be always there. I think the first localization mode that would be touched or influenced by technology is definitely subtitling, right? Because the other modes, like dubbing, there is a lot of creativity there. So machine translation is not a
problem for them yet.
Yeah, yes, dubbing translators will have work, I think, for the next years, basically. The same for voiceover, but subtitling is the thing that we should discuss now.
What are you saying? Are you saying that those creative editors, who are they? Are these professional subtitlers evolving into creative editors, or is that like a separate line of profession?
I think it's forming on our eyes right now, because people, different companies are trying different approaches and they see what is there on the market and how it's going to work with us, right? So many people are just rejecting those jobs, saying that it's not for them, they are translators. But again, it's coming, so we need to approach it somehow.
I think that we are. First of all, you are painting a very gloomy future for us. But well,
just being realistic, no?
Attending a lot of conferences so far, I noticed that there's this uneven battle between us translators and the companies. Maybe not here because there are many practitioners and academics here, but when you attend a conference where there are many companies very enthusiastic about MT and other
like technology companies.
Yes, the technology companies that talk about what they introduced recently in their processes, like dividing episodes into a couple of batches that are sent to several translators to work on. You can just listen to them and turn red in the audience, because this is what translators usually do.
But the hair.
No, this is pink. This is very, optimistic color. So, but I hear what Agnieszka is saying here. But I am not sure if all of us, in the end, will be able to accept all the changes. There will still be translators who, will fight to preserve subtitling as an art and as a very creative form of work. And we still need to remember about how we feel about our work and how we feel about subtitling as an art, because working on machine translation, if I'm just supposed to be post-editor, I think that this will hugely influence the way I create my words and the way I create the dialogues, because I don't suppose there is a possibility that seeing this machine input that it won't in some way influence what I do. So this enthusiastic factor, this creative factor that gives us all the joy in our work, this would essentially be lost due to technology, and this is kind of sad.
I remember what Max said in Stockholm, right? That working with empty output is a torture.
Yeah, I'm not saying, I'm just one sentence, I'm not saying I'm for it, I'm just saying it's coming, it's there, we should face it. So I'm from the old school, as I said. I like my work, I like my job, I love to be creative, and this is how I perceive subtitling as an art. However, technology is here, and I think we should like join a good battle, meaning together, and think how to face it, simply. That's it.
May I? A lot of effort is going into chopping up our work, subtitling, just to say. There is effort also going into doing the same thing to dubbing, actually. You can check what some companies are doing. And chopping it up, dequalifying it in some ways to make it supposedly faster and supposedly easier. And you can have less qualified people doing it and so on. The thing you cannot save is the quality. And if you edit a machine translation, you need a lot of experience. You have to be very, very good, and you have to have years and years of experience, because you have to hold on. You see all these reams of almost text that almost make sense sailing by you, and you get caught up in it, and it sort of seduces you, and mistakes slip through. It's really, really difficult. And if you want to have decent quality from a machine translation, it very often takes longer than starting from scratch. So it's like a false premise. And this is what we have to remember, that it's nothing to do with a good job. It is people who are finding ways to remove the wages, our wages, and direct it into another channel. It's called the wage grab, or the wage theft. You know, it's an ideological thing, and it's happening in a lot of professions, not only ours. And no, I'm not a socialist.
So what can we do? Agnieszka said we need to embrace the technology. There are those things happening, right? Rates getting lower, etc. Do we have, or do you have any specific ideas? What could be done?
Do we have a plan?
Exactly, because we may meet at another conference and have the same discussion again and again. And is there a way out of it? Do we have any fresh ideas what to do?
Well, I mean, first of all, we have to push back. We can't let all these statements just stand there. Just sort of leave them in, hanging in the air, like that we can do this via machine translation, because we cannot. And we have to push back against this kind of propaganda almost, constantly. It's very important to do that. And then we have to, raise awareness. That is kind of the first thing that we have to do. And then give us a couple of minutes, we'll come up with a plan.
I'm wondering about this strike. I don't know how it ended. Does anybody know? Because going on strike is something you can actually do, right?
Yes, but they don't call it going on strike. The NAVIO, the Norwegian Association, does not refer to it as going on strike. This is a lot of freelancers who are saying no thank you to jobs from BTI, because they have reached, the end of their tether. They can't, it's not viable. And they're not getting quite an arrogant response, as far as I can work out, from BTI so far. And then BTI is now being swallowed up in another company. There's things going on, so that it's all undecided at the moment.
So this is simply a boycott, what they are doing, right?
Yes, or no,
Or you
thank
can't
you.
go on
No,
strike if
thank
you're
you.
a freelancer, right?
No, thank you. What Navio does have is the means to support their colleagues so that they are not, because a lot of them are not true freelancers. A lot of us are not true freelancers. A lot of us work for only one company. So a lot of people only work, in Norway, only work for BTI. But they do actually, they are being supported so that they will not lose income through this, which I think is a very important thing.
Amelie mentioned raising awareness, and what I would like to add here is that it is very, very difficult to raise awareness in a corporate world, in a companies, because it's hard to get to the upper management. They have different goals than us, and we need to be aware of that. They may say that they care about the quality, but money is always the main factor here. And what I would say could be one solution, it's a very hard one and it takes time and a lot of work, is to raise awareness among the viewers, among the final client, the final recipient of our product. Because what I observe when I see when a Polish viewer finds some error in subtitles on Netflix, for example, that happens very often, they are furious. They say very bad words about subtitles who do work for Netflix. This is not...
But not to Netflix, right?
Not to Netflix. They say that out loud on social media, for example. And this is probably one of the few cases when our clients actually care, when there is an uproar, when there are situations like Roma subtitles in French and other languages which were very scandalous.
Yeah, they make the news, right?
Yes, they make the news. So we should educate our viewers to tell them that if they don't support us, if they don't oppose to that, they will receive an empty translated subtitles, and the quality of that will be very, very low, because they are not aware how subtitles come to life. They don't know how we work, how we do that. So so that would be my solution, just to spread awareness among the viewers. I don't know what kind of how we can do that, but maybe we can work out something together.
No, just adding to that, I fully agree. I mean, education, raising awareness is one thing, but we can sort of strike from two sides, so to say, meaning one, viewers, because it will take time, of course. But on the other hand, join an association, join an organization, be a vital voice, be there, have a label, and go and educate also those people who give us work, right? So if we attack from both sides, right, maybe there will be some effect.
Yeah, that's actually my next question. What is the role of audiovisual translator associations? If I'm like a freelancer, what's in it for me?
It's about raising the awareness of quality, yeah. Also helping each other, because we have some translators in conflict with some companies. We provide legal help for them. So education, the group is stronger. So
it's very true. This is your network. The association is your network. The company cannot be your network. They have other interests. They can. It's very limited what you can achieve with them and what they can do for you. Your network is in the association or the union. So that's very important, and they can help you if there's a conflict. If you have a proper union, or in the case of Norway, where they have funds, if there is a real conflict with a company, there is also money to substitute 80–90% of the wages that you lose. And this is why a union is a very important thing. Not that, I don't think we've ever had that sort of a conflict. And we hope we never do. But it's very important to be able to walk away from a company and say, we're taking a break here. We will talk when you're ready to talk. So there's all that help and support. But there's also another way of thinking about this, which we were talking about last night. and this is, don't ask what your union can do for you. You know, ask what you can do for your union. The stronger you make it, and this is not like a bunch of people with an office and an assistant and a budget and a thing, you know, they do all the stuff and they churn out all the newsletters and it's so easy for them, you know, it's not like that. Whenever somebody says, why hasn't this been done?
Even, you know, software makers, companies we work for and clients, academia, you know, we probably wouldn't be sitting here if it wasn't for our associations and having that contact. And I think only if we all talk to each other, we can make a change in the wider industry. So it's for us as audiovisual translators, but I think eventually we are all after having a quality product and trying to achieve it together. And we work not only on a national, but also on a European level now, the federation. And we really start to feel like we are being heard and we make a difference. And we are being taken serious by companies and clients, and they feel we are actually working towards a common aim.
Thank you. I hope you will have a new wave of applications there to your associations now after today.
But can I just add a small comment about the international umbrella that is AVT, because it makes it a lot easier to talk to all these big companies, because they don't have to talk to, well, they can also, and very often it goes on to become a fruitful discussion in each country, but they can talk to one entity representing the subtitles in 15 countries, 16, 15. I can never remember, but that's it. You know, that's a lot of people that they can get all that done in one conversation. So that we are also, yeah, we do feel that we are getting somewhere with this. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we're ready for some questions from the floor. Do we have any questions, comments? Pablo.
Thank you. I was just thinking about what you're saying. We often have these panels where we have practitioners and they pinpointing the issues, normally to do with rates and professional working conditions. And I was thinking, it's just a personal view, so I was just thinking that I don't know whether the idea of preserving our jobs, preserving your jobs in this case, carries much weight with companies that are thinking, well, you know, this is just evolution, you know, machine translation may not be good now, but it will be good 10 years down the line. We're seeing the same thing with stenographers and re-speakers, how re-speakers are kind of increasingly replacing stenographers. And of course, it's an issue, but then people will say, well, that's just the way the world's going. You know, re-speakers are, you know, you train them faster and that's the way it's going. So if you're a stenographer, you can always retrain as a re-speaker. So I don't know if that's the issue of preserving a job is going to, even if that's the final aim, is going to carry the weight. Whereas the quality, I think, is much more powerful. But for that, we need a strategy. And for that, you need to show whether, because machine translation may be there in 10 years, but maybe not now. I don't know. What I mean is, do we not need evidence to show, so partnerships between yourselves and academia saying, okay, let's carry out an analysis on the quality now. Let's give them the benchmark of where quality is, where quality should be, how it's not there, or maybe it is, I don't know. And then you publish that evidence. You have this kind of hard data that you can show to the companies to show, well, we're still not there. And I think this may be the focus that we need, rather than the other one. So there's some things that are particularly powerful. So when Sattel got the piece of news, is it called Sattel, yeah? You got the piece of news on The Guardian. The impact of that is huge. It was massive. And it could well be picked up by other newspapers. That's massive because it's not just read by the viewers, it's read by the filmmakers. So that divorce between filmmakers and translators no longer exists, because then suddenly the Netflix people are actually catching up on that and are thinking, well, you know, filmmakers are reading this as well. And so I wonder whether this is kind of the role that we should be, or the road that we should be pursuing. And also another one, which is, shouldn't you be as well, getting out there in film kind of forums talking about this. So, for example, Federico Spoletti, who provides subtitles for film festivals, he often attends and asks us to attend film sessions where you actually talk to filmmakers in film festival.
Could you get another mic? Time's up. Time's up, thank you. Yeah, lots of important issues. I think the quality also was coming from your experience with the FCC and Canadian work in other countries. What would you say to that? There is another mic lying right there.
Okay. It's working. Okay, well, a lot of what you're talking about is already happening. And we're not actually talking about preserving our jobs, you know, although I will say that this idea of who is replaced by artificial intelligence is also a question of who is in power, because a lot of functions are a lot easier to replace than anything to do with language, which is very difficult. But it's an ideological motivation. But we do talk about quality, and this is we don't say we don't want our jobs to disappear, because we know nobody cares in the industry as such. We do talk about quality, so that is already happening. And a lot of, you know, things get, The Guardian was a great thing. The article in The Guardian was a great thing, but it has actually happened before. You know, that big newspapers have picked up stories like that. It's not the first time. You know, it's happened in various countries. There is a world outside the English-speaking countries as well, as you well know. So this is already happening.
I'm wondering if Pablo mentioned hard numbers. No?
This is already a strategy, but it's happening nationally and internationally. And regarding film forums and so on, I know that Untertitelforum, the German association, is working every year with the organizers of the Berlinale, and have managed to get events put into the Berlinale as well, talking about AVT. So do you go to film forums and talk to people about it? That's very, very good, and we should get more people doing it.
Yeah, I think Pablo is going to Netflix next month, actually, right? Lucky you, California.
Going to Netflix. Are you having a meeting with them? Are you?
Oh, that's the ATA.
Yes. Super. That is fantastic.
Okay, I can see we have another question over there. Yes, you already have the mic. Go ahead.
Yeah, exactly. Hi, I'm Angela. I'm from Germany, and I'm also a subtitle translator. Something that was missing a little bit in the discussions, and in many discussions that I hear, I'm a fan of technology, basically, is, yes, you're not, and we had yesterday a workshop on how to use technology better to make ourselves better as translator, and also to profit ourselves as translators from technology. And this is something that I'm often very much missing in these discussions. Everybody is always thinking that our clients are going to profit from technology. And nobody can imagine that we can be the ones that really also reap the fruits from the tools that we are using and the smartness that we are really acquiring in the course of several years of our professional experience. And I think this is really a shame. There are many different ways that we can use technology for our best as linguists. And I think we should all be also talking about that. And I want us, and of course I'm really talking to the wrong people here, because everybody who is here is already attending a conference on that matter. But I see a lot of linguists, a lot of subtitle translators, for instance, who just studied something in the humanities, and then they didn't know where to go else, and then they started subtitling, and they are working for very low wages sometimes, or they are living in a country where it doesn't really matter how much you get paid, and then they are translating subtitles. And so they don't really know what they're doing, because they might be artists, and they write very well, but they're not good on the technology side, and they are not smart about being a professional and a freelancer and a self-employed and a company of their own. And I think this is a part where I would really like everybody here and everybody out there in the field improve themselves and not go and tell the clients to save our jobs, because they won't do that. But to handle the technologies ourselves in the best possible way. Know the tools, know the clients, know the prices, and then pick the raisins from the cake and really do and teach others how to do that. I think this is the way to go.
Would you like to respond to that?
Yes, I would. I think we're talking about two slightly different things, because we are certainly not enemies of technology. The thing that's happened is that we traditionally have been presented with some half-baked technology or new idea, and our rates have been slashed accordingly, so that we have been fighting a defensive action all the time to get rid of whatever, machine translation. You are now an editor, and we will pay you half or 2/3 of what you earned before, and it's not working. The tool is not the tool. It was a bit of a lie. So that is why I think we get this image as being technology shy or afraid of technology. We're certainly not. And the AVTE has just initiated talks with a technology company that professes to be very interested in technology for translators, and just, towards putting it our way. So it's true that we need to be more aware, and we need to be more proactive doing this. But it does not replace taking part, being part of an organization and networking and having a group to be with, to be stronger with. Yeah, that's it.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I can see we have another question. Paweł, and then Jean-François.
Hi, I have a question to Krzysztof, really. I totally agree and appreciate with everything you've said, all of you, about the quality, the low wages and so on, and that the state of the profession is dire. And I also definitely agree with the fact that we should congregate as a profession to be heard, to put pressure on broadcasters and content providers. And I think social media is a great place where we can do it, where we can be heard. But then again, when I entered the webpage of Stowarzyszenie Tłumaczy Audiowizualnych, the Facebook page, I can see that the last entry was in July 2018. So over a year ago. There's no information that this conference is taking place. There's no information that this panel is taking place. And you're saying, and I completely agree with it, that we should have a voice, that we should be heard, but you're silent yourselves. And the question is why?
Ooh, Krzysztof.
We are undergoing some changes within our board, executive board, because currently from 5 persons, there are only 2 active, and we have plenty to do, to attend conferences, to run, workshops. So I think it will be better. We need more numbers. We need active people. That's the problem Amalie said, yeah?
Yes. So, but I think we have someone here who would like to volunteer with newsletters, and that would be fantastic. You can talk afterwards.
Yeah,
Super.
we will.
Yeah, so the ball is back. Thank you, that was clever. Jean-François, you have a question.
Yes, it's more of a comment, or maybe it will raise issues. I'm Jean-François Cornu. I represent ATA, which is the French National Association of Audiovisual Translators, and AVT with my colleagues here. I also have a research activity, in particular with Carol O'Sullivan. We co-wrote and co-edited a book on the history of film translation. And I wanted to go back to what Magdalena said earlier about raising awareness with viewers. As you mentioned, how do we do this? One thing is to actually go and meet the audience. And to meet the audience is to go to film festivals, to organize events, talk to festival organizers, to put up, set up forums, discussions, with the showing of films like Carol just did, even though it was with stills, but we did this in Berlin this year in February, and it worked extremely well. And with both the French Association and hopefully at the European level also, we intend to do this more. The other aspect of raising awareness is as was mentioned before by Pablo, I think, is to raise awareness with filmmakers. And that's something that we started to do with the Roma controversy earlier this year, which we initiated with both a French and English version of an article on the appalling quality of the subtitles in any language of that film. It's likely to happen again if no lessons have been learned. Hopefully they have, but I'm still a bit skeptical when Martin Scorsese's new film is released is online with Netflix later this year. So we'll keep a very close eye on this. And also the fact that if we can raise awareness both with the audience and with the creators, with the filmmakers, so that they realize we are also creators, as you mentioned, Agnieszka, which is absolutely right. We are not service providers. We are creators. And for that matter, we come under the authorship issue. And authorship is extremely important because it's a recognition of our work as creators. With our faults, we're not super gods in translations, but we do have a creative input, which machine translation doesn't have, which post-editing doesn't have either, in my eyes. And it's also important, as Carol highlighted in her talk earlier, for history, because in 10, 50 years from now, who will know who subtitled Roma into English? No one. So if we don't do this, no one will do it for us.
Thank you. Yes, I can see, Carol, you raised a hand.
If I just
would you like to respond first? Yes.
I would like to add one thing to what you just said, because this is, continuing the subject of raising awareness. I found one group of audience that is very proactive in this way, because I was trying with, along with my a couple of colleagues, we were attending not film festivals, but fantasy and pop culture conventions like Comic Cons and so on, and we were having panels there, raising awareness about how subtitles are made. And this is a very, very good audience for that, because these are people who are very passionate about the content. Try butchering up an episode of Doctor Who and they will kill you. So this is what they are responding very good to. And what we were trying to encourage them to do is to go on social media and vocally complain when they see something bad done to their favorite TV show, and tag all of those distributors, tag VOD companies, tag streaming companies, because the uproar in social media is most effective in showing them that audiences are actually not happy with that, and they react to bad quality. Mm-hmm. So you can also do that.
She has a mic. Yeah.
Yeah, you were first. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I also wanted to add up to what Pablo and Jean-François said. For me, a major issue that AVT is usually in the filmmaking and distribution process is an absolute afterthought. And it's not where it should be. It should be an integral part of the filmmaking or post-production and distribution process. And usually it's just the very last thing that is thought about. Of the people who participated at the last Media for All conference, maybe remember a comment that was made by someone who represents a media company who compared audiovisual translation to carpentry, which can be made faster with using faster saw, meaning tools like machine translation. So I think this is a bad place for us to be, and we need to make it an integral part of the process. and make filmmakers and creators, content creators aware of the importance of audiovisual translation and the value we add to their products. And there should also be budgets allocated according to the value we add. So
yeah, talking about quality, I have to jump in here because I have a question, actually myself. Now I have a mic. We're talking about translators and companies, and I think it's a sort of simplification of the whole process. You mentioned quality, you mentioned process. It's not only a translator and a company, right? There's you guys translate, and then I imagine in most companies there's some QC going on later. I'm wondering how that works. Who has the final say? Well, do you have any comments or ideas how the workflow could be improved? Because you might be happy with your translation, then it goes back from the QCer, and then what happens? And could that be improved?
Yeah, in a big way. From my perspective, what definitely needs improving right now is the contact between the translator and QCer, because bigger companies have a tendency to limit that, probably for their own sake, because they don't have to supervise the whole conversation, and that could be a little bit problematic and require more work on their side. So I get where it comes from, but in the end, it really improves the quality if we have contact with our QCers, if we can address their remarks, if we can disagree with something, for example. Right now, it is very often it's hard to actually to acquire such a contact.
I have a lot to say on this subject.
Yeah, me too.
But the thing is, if you are an experienced translator and you've been trained properly, either at university or through colleagues training each other, you deliver your job and somebody proofreads it, and in the even better companies they look at the image and the translation, and then there's proofreading afterwards, and they will give you feedback. And they correct mistakes and so on. But they'll tell you what's there, and you do the corrections yourself. And they'll tell you what they think, and you go yes, no. But the ultimate say must be with the translator. It's also an issue of authorship. So, exactly. You're not really supposed to change things without the say-so of the translator. The thing is that some of these companies, Netflix, who are trying to start up very quickly in all these countries, and instead of doing the groundwork and getting the people and getting them trained, they employ, to a large extent, people who are not properly trained, and then the QCers have to, because there simply hasn't been the time, and of course we don't want a lot of people employed because investors don't like that, and so on. So the QCers are there to raise the level, to get it to an acceptable level, and that is because when you refuse to do the groundwork, you're going to have a system like that is unsatisfactory, and the QCers will change whatever they like because otherwise it just takes too long. So yes, there's room for a lot of improvement there.
Krzysztof?
Yeah, another problem is that, in my opinion, to be a good QCer, you have to be first a good translator with 5, 10, 15 years of experience. And Netflix introduced a new wave of QCers with whole year under their belt of experience, right? And it's not a good thing. They sometimes spoil our text. So also what Magdalena said, that conversation, the workflow, information between QCer and translator.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Yes, Agnieszka, and then we'll take a question from Carol.
Just adding to that recently what is happening is that the work is going through a translator, QCer, and straight to broadcast, meaning to viewers. And there is no contact in between. This is one. But what is even worse is that QC is QCing something, or even spot checking, 5 minutes here, 5 minutes there. And those corrections, they're not really corrections, and they may spoil the work of the actual translator. So after these checks, there should be like a step back to the translator to approve or reject those changes. So this is one I wanted to comment. And coming back to Magda's comment, just a quick one. You said that raising awareness among people, comic cons, etc., etc. Yes, I agree. What you don't like, say it out loud. Yes, of course. But also praise. There are good things out there. So if you like it, we are there. We are doing our job. So if someone likes it, give them a like, yeah, because they are also there. And of course, criticism is needed. Yes, you have to express it, but also maybe there is something you really liked. And it would also be good for professional translators to hear, because we're
all humans, yes.
Yeah,
I also got feedback.
Nobody says a good word if there is nothing. If there is no feedback, we are happy, because it means it was okay.
Yes,
yeah,
that's true.
So only complaints come back to you, never a good word. So maybe it's also a way to improve this.
Yeah. My students told me the other day, you don't give us enough positive feedback, we only get critical feedback. So that's the same point, yes.
So
Carol.
So I just wanted to really endorse what has been said about going... So obviously it would be great to raise awareness about subtitling in the mass of people who are watching Netflix, but the reality is that it's the people who are already invested in particular content who are likely to respond. And I really endorse the idea of sci-fi fantasy fans as one area, but also the sort of art house cinema circuit, where people go to see subtitles specifically because they have the option to see them with subtitles. And this is maybe something also UK specific, and I don't want to be too UK specific, but we're trying to develop a collaboration with our local art house cinema, which involves bringing over a subtitler who would attend a screening and then be available after the screening to answer questions. So not an event like the one that ran in Berlin, which was brilliant, but which was an extract as a topic for discussion, but really people who just want to go and see a movie and then have a chance to talk to the person who subtitled the movie. And I think this is a format that's really promising. It is turning out to be really tricky because of the time, the lag time of cinema showings and so on. So we, but I would encourage both university colleagues who have the funding potentially to organise those kinds of events, but also audiovisual translation professionals who are interested in participating in those kind of events to be in conversation with each other, because I think that could really add something.
Thank you, Carol. Sonia has a mic, and I think she has the right to ask a question. Very short comment.
Very short. I agree wholeheartedly, Carol, and this is definitely something we're working on as well. What we shouldn't forget also is that in some countries there is an enormous amount of work done, and it's the TV, everything. In English-speaking countries, certain things are subtitled. In our countries, in Scandinavia and so on, nearly everything is subtitled. So there's a lot of work there, and that has to do with lawmakers as well. And academics also play an important part in this, keeping quality at a good level. But I agree, this is something we should do more.
Thank you. Sonia, one short question.
Yes, my name is Sonia. Of course, I'm a part of the volunteering team here, and I'm a student, of course, of the Institute.
Thank you for being here, by the way.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm learning so much from you today and throughout these 3 days. And you were discussing the future of audiovisual translation, and I could say that me and my fellow students are a part of that future. So just maybe a little word of encouragement from you, or some advice as to what to do, because I don't know, we would like to be a little bit prepared for what's coming.
That's actually my final question, and it's very nice. We have the same question. Would you recommend it as a profession? They're still young, they can decide.
Yes, 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 yes. Go for it. I think we would all recommend it as a profession. It's wonderful work, and that's why a lot of people want to do it. It is wonderful work. If you get to do it properly, it's wonderful, it's very rewarding. This should not encourage you to accept low prices, because a lot of work is rewarding, and it shouldn't be badly paid for that reason. yes, go into it, but yes, be prepared to fight. You have to have a certain fighting spirit as well, and you have to cooperate with your colleagues. But yes.
Okay, so that's a strong yes. I can see more hands. That's a yes during the coffee break. Let me invite everyone for coffee now. We have half an hour. And just a reminder, when you're back, this room is going to be turned into 2 rooms. So make sure you know which one you're going to. This is 7. This is 8. The program is outside, if you can have a look. Thank you to all my guests. Thank you for all the questions. I think it was brilliant. Thanks.
Thank you.